Well, I was born right here in Houma. I've spent pretty much all of my life in Houma, other than the time I lived in Lafayette for college. My parents are Paul Norris Guidry and Barbara Adine Antil Guidry. My dad was a boat captain and worked for Freeport McMoran, for Freeport Sulphur, and was an oyster fisherman on the side. And my mother worked for Rosalie and Reyes. She was born in Oriente Province, Cuba, and was a bookkeeper and restaurant manager. My earliest education, I would have to say, came from my mother. She taught me to read, as she did all of us, and in fact I received my first library card in 1959 when I was 4.5. And my mom really was instrumental, I think, in educating all of us. She taught us to read, and she taught us to pray, and she taught us to work very hard, because she always worked very hard. I always enjoyed the fact that I went to public schools my whole life, other than my law school career. I went to Houma Elementary, which again, everyone went to school together and knew everyone else, and then Houma Junior High School, and then I graduated from Terrebonne High School, which I'm proud of. I'm married to Keith Whipple. Keith Mitchell Michael Whipple. He is a lawyer and has been for 54 years. And he and I have one child together, Dr. Christopher Whipple, who is a hospitalist and emergency room doctor at Touro. I have stepchildren, my 3 stepchildren, who are all in their own right truly remarkable. I was fortunate enough to be given a position with the Houma Courier, the local newspaper, back then the Houma Daily Courier. And what I did was, our newspaper at school could not be published because, as in most public schools, there's not a lot of extra money, so I made a deal with Mr. Ray Dill, who was the publisher of the paper, that in return for him publishing the paper, I would write a column for the newspaper, and that's what I did all through high school. I went to USL, the University of Southwestern Louisiana, now it's UL Lafayette, and I started there in 1973 and I finished in 76, and I had a great time at USL. I felt like I was pretty lucky to have a good foundation for law school. But I took political science courses, and I really loved the dialogue and the discourse and the conversation about not only what was going on in my part of the world, but what was going on in the rest of the world. And I wound up majoring in English and political science with a double major. And I had always aspired to go to medical school, but it didn't work out in that way. I went to law school primarily because I was able to get a full scholarship at Loyola. And I started out at Loyola thinking that I wanted to do something that was interesting, but that would still allow me to have a family as part of my career, to have a good career and a good family life, because that's very important to me. And law school was a place where I think I learned the most about how to get along in the world. I worked really hard in law school, and at one point I thought, I don't know if this is what I want to do. I worked for the Army Corps of Engineers, and I wasn't particularly happy with the work, although I enjoyed the people I worked with. So I came home the summer after my junior year and told my parents I'd decided to finish my biology degree and apply for medical school, which of course they were not very pleased to hear after I was 2/3 of the way through. But instead, my mom convinced me to work in Houma for a local lawyer, for his firm, and to see if I would enjoy it more if I did a different kind of work. And that's what I did. I spent the entire summer shadowing a lawyer who eventually became my husband, and I realized that litigation and being in the courtroom was something really fun and challenging and interesting. And so I finished my law degree and came back and practiced law with my husband and 2 other men for 10 years until I was elected to the court in 1990. In 1990, I ran for the Court of Appeal, and at that time there were no women on the Court of Appeal. And at that time, as I understand it, it was virtually unheard of for anyone to run against an incumbent. And when I ran like that, I was told by someone who was very involved in politics, honey, don't you know that women don't run for the Court of Appeal? And there are two rules. Women don't run for the Court of Appeal, and the second rule is you don't run against an incumbent. And my response was, well, number one, I had nothing to do with making those rules, and number two, you should consider those rules broken. I was appointed to serve on the Louisiana Supreme Court when one of the justices recused because of a conflict, and it was a very interesting time in my life, and I truly enjoyed the work that I did on the Supreme Court. I wound up being the author in one of the cases, which was a case where a criminal defendant had filed a challenge to the constitutionality of the law that made it criminal for a felon to be in possession of a firearm while committing certain offenses, drug and violent offenses. And it was just a really remarkable experience because I was appointed when I was pretty new as a Court of Appeal judge, and then to be able to be the author for the court was just incredible to me. If someone wanted to know numbers, when I became chief 5 years ago, at the end of 2012, I became chief January 2nd of 2013. At that time, the numbers of cases that I had been involved in were just under 10,000 decisions. And of those cases, I had authored 1,365 full opinions myself. I participated in 4,095 other cases, and finally, as far as writs, I had been on writ panels and rendered opinions in 7,890 writs. So to put that in perspective, if you think about that, we basically, in our court, we write a case every other day. In the community, one of the things that I've been the most involved in is Rotary. Rotary International. And Rotary to me is one of the most worthy and worthwhile organizations that exist because Rotary International has almost single-handedly been responsible for eliminating polio in the world. And when you think about the difficulties that we are facing now with the Ebola virus and the ongoing threat of a pandemic occurrence, you realize the importance of the work that Rotarians do. I've spent a lot of years in Rotary. I've been in Rotary 27 years. I've served on the board. I served as president. I was blessed to be named Rotarian of the Year. I enjoy the work that I do. I volunteer to be part of the Southdown Marketplace that twice a year at least we raise money for the market by manning the hot dog booth. And you would think, well, that's not such an important thing, but it truly is, because at the end of the day, the world has gotten so much smaller. So the work in Rotary lets me know and has helped me to meet people from all over. I've housed Rotarians and visiting Rotarians from Brazil. I've been participated in work study groups with visitors from all over the world, and I've really enjoyed my Rotary work. For fun, I love Mardi Gras. I love to put on a mask and throw my beads. I'm a member of the oldest ladies carnival club in New Orleans, which is the Crew of Iris, and we celebrated in 2016. We celebrated 100 years. It was the 100th anniversary of the Crew of Iris, but I was a charter member of the Crew of Aphrodite. In fact, I wrote the bylaws and rules for that crew when it started. I'm pretty proud of the fact that when I entered when I became a member of the Ladies Carnival crew, at that time, none of the Ladies Carnival crews in Homa were integrated. There were no African Americans who held membership in the organizations. And I'm proud of the fact that one of the things that I did while I was a member, and back when I was a float co-captain, was I sponsored and submitted the application and appeared before the board to have the first female African American admitted to the club. And that was very important to me personally, and I'm proud of that fact, and I've remained friends with those ladies from Carnival Club, even though I don't ride anymore in that crew. And I think it was important for the community, and it was an important thing for the organization to take a look at itself. And so I've really enjoyed my Mardi Gras experiences. Every dream I'd abandoned suddenly came true. But the thing I guess that I love the most to do in my time, my extra time, such as it is to sing. I sing with an invitational choir, Les Amis de la Chanson, and I sing with the Cathedral Choir at St. Francis de Sales. And we sing every kind of music you can imagine. We sing in English, French, Russian, German, Latin, Spanish, and Italian. And we do free concerts at least twice a year. And one of the most wonderful experiences, one of the 5 best days of my life, occurred when we were invited to sing the Ellingboe Requiem at Carnegie Hall. When the composer premiered that work, he saw where we had rented the orchestral score and had performed it at St. Francis. I study under the direction of Leslie Van Ostale, and of course it's too expensive to own those kind of musical scores, so you rent them. And we had rented the score for our 2 choirs, and we performed it with members of the LPO, Louisiana Philharmonic. And so when Dr. Ellingboe premiered the work at Carnegie Hall, he contacted our director and invited us to appear with his choir and several university choirs to present the premiere performance of it, which he conducted us himself off music. And it was just a remarkable thing. As far as honors and accolades, I think the greatest honor for me is the fact that I was elected in 1990 and I beat an incumbent by over 10,000 votes when I had not one endorsement, other than the one that counted from the voters on October 6, 1990, except the Houma Courier did endorse me. I'm most proud of being elected, and I'm proud of how I conducted my campaign because I never spoke about my opponent. I spoke about myself. So I'm proud of that fact, and also I'm proud that I won by over 10,000 votes. And I think the second greatest honor is the fact that I'm now in my 3rd term, and I've been elected and re-elected each time without an opponent, which means a great deal to me. It says to me that people still have confidence in my ability and confidence that I am fair and that I'll do a good job, and that's the biggest honor of all. I've had the same staff for many, many years. My secretary has been my secretary for 38 years as of the date we're recording this, and my law clerks have worked for me for 25 years and one for 24 years of the time that I've been on the bench. And so I consider the honor is not only mine, but the honor is honoring them and the work that they do to help me be able to do what I like to do. Probably the case that has meant the most to me is a case involving shell dredging of Lake Pontchartrain. I wrote the opinion early on in my career that upheld the outlawing of shell dredging in Lake Pontchartrain, and as a result of that decision has allowed the ecological environment of the lake to be restored to normality, so that now there are stores of fish stock in the lake and people can once again enjoy the beauty that is Lake Pontchartrain. It's important to me professionally because it was a sort of landmark case in administrative law on permitting and natural resources, and it involved a lot of tension between the goals of government and business and the values of the citizenry in wanting to have a clean environment. And I'm proud of that case, also because on a personal level, my dad had such a close connection with the sea and the waters of Louisiana, and it meant a lot to me. When I started practicing law, my husband told me, he said, right now you start out with the greatest and most precious commodity there is. And I said, what is that? He said, credibility. Guard what you do, what you say, what you write, how you conduct yourself in court, and preserve your credibility. That's the secret of being a great lawyer. And the other thing he said was, treat every case like it's the only one, and make it be the only one because for the people involved it is the only one. And he's right about that. At the end of the day, I think the most important thing that we can do is look back and say, how did I handle it when times were tough, whether it was fiscal budget restraints and constraints, whether it was the demands of a particular docket, whether it was resolving issues in employment law when you supervise 125 people. At the end of the day, the most important thing I think to be remembered for is that I hope that I had courage, and President Kennedy years ago defined courage as grace under pressure, and I hope that that's how others see me.